There's this deep universal need we all have to know where we come from. But imagine if that story just stopped. For millions of Black Americans, it does. It hits a dead end, a historical brick wall built by centuries of slavery where family records simply weren't kept. But today, we're diving into an incredible story about how science is starting to tear down that wall, all beginning in a small, historic village in Maryland.
And that feeling, right there, summed up so perfectly by Crystal Emery, is really the heart of this whole thing. Her own personal search for answers led her, through a wild mix of old records and cutting-edge science, to an ancestor at a place called Catoctin Furnace. Her journey is going to be our way into this much bigger story of connection and discovery.
So first, we have to talk about this thing called the 1870 brick wall. If you've ever tried to trace your family history, you might have heard of it. For genealogists, especially those tracing Black ancestry, it's this incredibly frustrating and painful barrier that just stops countless family trees cold. So what is it exactly?
Well, the 1870 census was a huge deal. It was the very first time, finally, that almost every Black person in the United States was recorded by their full name. Before that, enslaved people were usually just listed as property, if they were listed at all. With no names, no family ties, families were systematically and brutally torn apart, their connections just erased from the official record, which makes it nearly impossible to trace a family line any further back.
So when the paper trail goes cold, where do you even begin to look? Well, in this story, this search pivots from dusty archives to the earth itself, to a pre-revolutionary industrial village tucked away in Maryland's Catoctin Mountains.
This right here, this was Catoctin Furnace. From the 1770s all the way to the early 1900s, this place was a bustling industrial powerhouse. It made iron for everything you can think of, cookware, tools, even cannons for the Revolutionary War. And the engine driving this whole operation, it was a large community of highly skilled African ironworkers, the vast majority of whom were enslaved.
And then, in 1979, the past literally came to the surface. Construction crews were expanding a highway right through this area, and they stumbled upon something totally unexpected, a burial ground. Archaeologists were brought in, and they carefully excavated 35 graves. The remains were sent to the Smithsonian, and analysis suggested they were the African-American workers from the furnace. And then, for decades, the story just went quiet.
So this became the central haunting question. With no names on the rough stone grave markers and no written records to go by, who were these men, women, and children? Could their story ever actually be told? For a really long time, it seemed impossible.
All right, so the paper trail is cold, the archives are silent. What do you do? Well, researchers turned to a completely revolutionary tool, a key that could unlock the secrets that were held inside the bones themselves, ancient DNA analysis. The process here is just wow. It's incredibly delicate, but it's also massive in scale. First, scientists painstakingly extracted ancient DNA from the remains of 27 of the individuals. Then comes the part that is a total game changer. They compared that ancient genetic code to the enormous DNA database of over 9 million consenting research participants from 23andMe. They were hunting for identical segments of DNA, those little genetic echoes that prove you share a common ancestor.
So what did they find? I'll tell you. It wasn't just a handful of connections or a few distant cousins. The results were, honestly, staggering. They uncovered a vast, invisible family tree that was hidden in plain sight all along.
41,799. Just let that number sink in. The DNA from just 27 people from centuries ago connected them to nearly 42,000 living relatives today. That 1870 brick wall we talked about? Yeah, this science didn't just chip away at it. It blew it wide open.
And the DNA told another story too, a story of origins. It traced their ancestry back across the Atlantic. The strongest African genetic links pointed to the Wolof people of Senegambia and the Congo people of West Central Africa, which historical records confirmed were major sources of the slave trade to Maryland. The analysis also showed European ancestry, mostly from Great Britain and Ireland.
The sheer geographic scale of this is immense. You can see how the connections just radiate out from that one small point in Maryland, spreading all across the United States, and then reaching all the way back to specific regions in Africa and Europe. It's a really stunning picture of a rediscovered family diaspora.
And this timeline just bridges history in such a powerful way. On one side, you have the period when these people lived, worked, and were buried. And on the other, you have the birth years of their living genetic relatives. It's like DNA became a time machine. collapsing a 160-year gap and connecting the past directly to the present.
Okay, so we have the incredible science and the mind-boggling numbers. But what does all of this actually mean? What is the human impact when a community has its history restored and thousands of people suddenly discover a new branch of their family tree?
This quote from Hess Stinson, a descendant communicator, really gets to the heart of it. This isn't just data, it's proof. It is undeniable scientific evidence that corrects the local lore and restores the central, vital role of African American workers to the region's history. It's about reclaiming a narrative that was almost lost. I mean, just look at this transformation. What was once a story of erased history and anonymous labor has become the foundation for a vibrant, living community. And the descendants aren't just the subjects of the story. They are now its co-stewards, actively shaping the future of this historical site and deciding how its story gets told.
In the end, it really all comes down to this simple, profound idea from Mrs. Donna Nelson, one of the descendants. At a time when there are so many efforts to control and even erase history, this project is this incredible testament to the power of just being able to tell the truth with the science to back it up.
So the legacy of this project is huge, and it's still growing. It's about correcting the historical record, yes, but it's also about empowering a community of descendants, creating a real place for education and remembrance, and providing a whole new model for how we can practice restorative history. And this leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. That 1870 wall, it represents a failure of the written archive. The story of Catoctin Furnace offers an incredible answer for what can come next. It proves that even when the archives fall silent, our very DNA can speak volumes. It shows us that our legacy isn't just something buried in the past. It is alive, and it is walking among us today.